Hey guys, so I've created this video today to speak about the human ego. Now, the human ego is a very deep and complex spiritual concept to talk about. And I think to be able to talk about it within 10 to 15 minutes doesn't really do it a great deal of justice. So what I'm going to do today is just really speak about it from the perspective of human evolution. Okay, so I'm going to speak about it in relation to the human evolutionary process and the Earth's evolution, and basically just want to try and get a little bit of an understanding about the human ego. Why do we have one? How did it even come about? And what is the current mission of the human ego? So what's motivated me today to speak about the ego is that I've noticed in spiritual circles there is a lot of talk about the ego in a very negative way. Okay, people will say we need to get rid of the ego, we must shed the ego is bad, it's a negative thing. Now there certainly is a negative aspect to the ego that I believe we do need to work with spiritual development. And I think that through spiritual practice, we can learn to have a much healthier ego. The dissolving of the ego is a concept that comes from Eastern philosophy. And so we have to really understand that from within that particular cultural context, okay? I think the problem we have today is that since spirituality has really burst onto the New Age scene, a lot of these ancient spiritual teachings have been taken out of context, okay? We have misunderstood them, misinterpreted them, and it's easy to do that when we are coming from a completely different state of consciousness. The consciousness, okay, humanity's consciousness and even the Earth's consciousness is not the same today, okay, as it was before in ancient times, because there is an evolutionary process that happens, okay, and consciousness has therefore changed. So consciousness today probably isn't the same as what it was even 100 years ago, right? So we have to consider therefore spiritual concepts and teachings for the appropriate time at which they were taught and what was the actual state of humanity's consciousness at that particular time period. Yeah, if we don't understand, okay, if we don't have this understanding that man's consciousness and Earth's consciousness is something that was in a very different state, okay, today than what it is before, we will have a tendency today to take a very literal approach to these concepts, okay? And we'll also approach them from a very materialistic mindset, because humanity has been deeply entrenched in the material plane for a very long time. Okay, so from a psychological perspective, Carl Jung defined the ego as the center of the field of consciousness. He said that it was the part of the psyche where our conscious awareness resides, our sense of identity and existence, and that this part can be seen as a kind of a command headquarters, that it's organizing our thoughts, our feelings, our senses, our intuition, it's regulating our access to memory, and he saw it as a psychological necessity. Okay, so the ego is not something that is to be gotten rid of. Yeah, it's actually something that gives us our sense of individuality, and individuality is actually an important part of man's spiritual journey to enlightenment. Okay, now let's take a look at the human form, okay, the actual human being today. So the way we know the human being today is not the same as what the human being always was, okay? The human form and what actually makes up the whole human is actually a result of a very long process of creation, of evolution, okay? the human form has actually gradually developed, and it's over a long process come into physical matter. It's actually fallen in density and dimension over a long period of time. Okay, so we have actually individuated, we've become more and more individualized over time. So the human being today is composed of what Steiner introduced as a fourfold being. Okay, so Steiner only introduced this. By the way, he didn't invent it, because this is something that has been known in ancient times, okay, within the Indian culture, Chinese, Japanese, Egyptian culture. You know, this is something, the composition, okay, of what actually makes up the human form is something that has been known for a very, very long time, okay. So in anthroposophy, Rudolf Steiner introduced this concept, and he described it as the human being fourfold, okay. He has a physical body, an etheric body, an astral body, and the ego, or the I. So the human body has already undergone 3 other transformations before the ego was even added to it, before we even knew the human body as the beautiful complex structure that it is today, okay? So there's been this long evolutionary process that has taken place with the human body. So if we were to retrace, okay, this long process back to an earlier time period on Earth called the Lemurian period, that would have been the time period where humanity would have gained its I, okay, its individual awareness. So the physical human being, basically in these 3 previous incarnations of the earth, received its physical, its etheric, and its astral body, okay, and currently in the 4th incarnation of the earth is where we received our ego. So the human body received its etheric body and its astral body in 2 previous incarnations, okay, and they are known as the sun phase and the moon phase of the earth. So since the ego, okay, has been added to the human form, the ego has completely transformed the human body, okay? And since that time, humans have actually been through many, many, many incarnations. And so the ego has gradually developed through these incarnations, okay, and through each incarnation the ego is working upon these other 3 members, yeah, the etheric, the astral, and the physical bodies, okay. It's working upon them and transforming them. And so the astral body as it exists today is actually twofold, because part of the astral body has been transformed already by the ego and part of it has not, but eventually the whole of the astral body would have been transformed into what is known in the Indian tradition as manas, okay? And in anthroposophical terms, manas is known as spirit self. So through further incarnation, the human ego will then work also upon the etheric body, and then that is transformed into buddhi. And buddhi in anthroposophical terms is known as life spirit. And then finally we will reach a point where the physical body is completely transformed into what is called Atma, and Atma in anthroposophical terms is known as spirit man. So these stages of transformation are done with the earth. So as the earth itself goes through its future evolutionary phases and its future incarnations, the ego is transforming our bodies into higher bodies. Okay, so now what is the mission of this human ego? What are we to do? So the current phase for Earth's evolution is for the development of love. Okay, in a previous Earth incarnation, which was the moon phase, ancient moon phase, it was for the development of wisdom. So at that time, wisdom was being streamed down onto planet Earth. And so today, in its current incarnation, we see this wisdom now all around us. Okay, we can see how it permeates everything. The way, there is a certain intelligence, okay, that permeates all of nature and in the human body as well. The way the bones hold the body up, how each individual organ has its own intelligence and its own wisdom that it functions with, right? So we're surrounded by this wisdom now, okay? And so now we are to develop love, so that in Earth's next incarnation, everything is to be permeated with this spiritual love, yeah? And so this is our mission, and this is something that has to be done through the human being, and the only way it could be achieved is through the human being having gained its I am awareness, its self-awareness, its individuality, right? For it to be fully independent, for it to not to be bound to another. It's just like your hand cannot love the rest of your organism while it is attached to the rest of your body. Now, going back to the Lemurian epoch, during that time, okay, was the first time that the human consisted of its three members, the physical, the etheric, and the astral, okay, and then the ego was then added to it. We've got to remember that the consciousness of humanity during the Lemurian period was very different to man's consciousness as it is today, okay? For the most part of the day, humans were very connected to the spiritual worlds. The days were a lot shorter than the night. There was a lot more interaction with spiritual beings. Man was much more in a dreamier and clairvoyant-like state, okay? And it's during this time that humanity received its first instruction of love. And so love was streaming down onto the planet Earth. And so now it's our independent ego that allows this love to be developed within ourselves. So I really hope that you enjoyed watching this video. And if you did, then please give it a like and perhaps consider subscribing. Have a wonderful day, and I'll see you again in the next one.